Hello, everybody. It's Gary Stuckey with Real Music. Hope you're doing okay wherever you are today. Hope it is going well, and it's going well for me. Hope you're feeling nostalgic and you're in the mood for some old 80s and 90s hair bands. Yeah. What if he likes to be called hair bands? Mike Tramp of White Lion is here. Yeah. Surprise you? He's here talking about his brand new album coming out on August 23rd with Mike Tramp's White Lion. And they've got the Songs of White Lion Volume 2 and really cool songs. Some songs they didn't get around to the first time on the first volume, but now they're doing this and they got a tour coming up and excited about that. And it was so awesome to talk to him. I've been a fan for years and so many cool things to talk about. And I think we covered it all. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. So here we go. Here he is. Here's Mike Tramp.
There you go. What's going on, bro?
Hey, man. You doing okay?
Yeah.
Good. I like the hat. That's a cool hat. Who's that guy? That Tramp guy? Awesome.
I tell you what, here's a little opening story based upon the situation of the tense situation of the world. Last year I was on tour in Germany, and during the day I'm just taking a stroll with a couple of friends through like a little like sort of like medieval town, very cool with small castles and very cool there. And I see this guy, walking with his wife like a tourist, definitely like sort of like staring me down. And finally he comes up and he says, "What's with the Trump hat?" And I go, "What's with you leaving high school 1 year too early?"
Hey, come on. Hey, you should say it's make music great again, with it. No, just
Listen,
no,
I
but
already have. I had a friend of mine who has a printing, like an embroidery company. He made two hats like that. I gave them to a friend of mine. I was considering having them with me on my next U.S. tour, but somehow I just want to focus on the rock and roll and not draw more attention to me than needed.
I totally
Unfortunately,
I understand. I totally understand. Um, but it's great to see you after all these years. I've been a fan for many years. Uh, so that must mean you're getting older or something. If
yeah,
I've been a fan since I was a little kid, I
yeah.
mean,
There was a time when that meant, I mean, I've been a fan for a lot of years. Says, "Oh, that's great," and now it means a lot of years. Okay, yeah.
it adds up.
It sure adds up. I mean, there were a guy that started the interview the other day and says, "You've been in rock and roll. Oh, no, you've been in the music business for almost 50 years." And I go, "Holy cow, he's referring to that I started my first recording in 1974 when I was 13 years old."
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a while. That was a good year that was the year I was born, by the way, 74.
Okay.
But
Yeah, a lot of
but
good. Yeah. Yeah, it was a good year. I could come up with a lot of great things.
very good year. All righty, well, we'll get started. There's so much to talk about, so little time.
Cool. I got the time.
You got the time. Um, man, and I know, and you've said it before, I think on some of your posts, like everybody asks the same questions. And of course, they're going to ask about this, they're going to ask about that. And I try not to do that when I interview people. I try to, I want to find out some stuff maybe that people don't know about, or maybe a different kind of perspective. But I do know this: you got a brand new album coming out, right, on August 23rd, the second volume of the Songs of White Lion. And I talked to Marcus Nand a couple months ago, and what a talented guy! What a perfect
What a
fit
great
for what
guy all
right?
around.
He's perfect fit for what you're doing, right? So you probably realized that instantly when he was doing the songs on the album that, yep, this is going to sound great. I know y'all did the first album, and then probably you didn't get around to finishing all the songs that you wanted to put on that first album, I guess, right? So that's why you got the new one coming out, right?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, but let me just clarify, not clarify, but just overstate that obviously I couldn't do anything um with this return to the White Lion world or its music without Marcus. He's the key. I might be the founder of White Lion, I might be the songwriter and the voice, etc., etc. But without somebody reproducing Vito Brada's guitar parts note for note, and also now in a different key,
Yeah.
the this project would be simply impossible. There would be nobody. There would be nobody who could go in and do what he does. There would be nobody that would honestly believe that they would spend that time and leave themselves out of the picture, because that's what Marcus does. He's obviously studied and played guitar for ages, and are great at a lot of different styles, but going in and tackling Vito Bratta and not bringing yourself into it to say, well, I might be playing Vito Bratta, but gotta make sure that I'm in there too.
Right.
Not a lot of people want to do that because they have their ego and so and so. But Marcus, first of all, is an admirer and a fan of Vito. He loves the songs before Marcus and I ever met back in when we met in '94. So there's true respect to what it is we set out to do. And once Marcus said, I can play the songs in another key, we knew it was a go. And then we went in to record that album without even thinking that we ever were going to take it to the live stage.
Right.
And then when we took it to the live stage, first Marcus and I with our power duo, we realized, okay, White Lion has been away for a long time. And I'm saying White Lion in the big picture. Obviously, it's not the original band coming back. And then then months later, we added a full band tour and saw this. This was really nice. Even though, we're not playing arenas, we're playing clubs and stuff like that, but it
Right.
felt right. And it was during that tour when Marcus started looking at each other and says, well, it's pretty clear right now that we're going to do volume 2.
Right.
And then we started selecting the songs and sat down and figure out, okay, if we're going to do Lights and Thunder, I'm going to sing there. If we're going to do Out with the Boys or Going Home, or not Going Home, but Don't Give Up, or All You Need Is Rock and Roll, and then nail those down, and then Marcus would do the work. And I know a lot of people that would rather do a lot of other things, but he did the job, and I think he's going to get a lot of credit for it. And personally, I wish him the best with where he can take this.
Right. And the music sounds so good. I mean, it really does. And it's hard to do, like you said, when you're tuning down and he's matching the music, and you can't really tell that it's tuned down because you get so involved in the song. And that's
Yeah.
okay with people
Yeah.
like me. Are there people out there though that go, they want to hear the original? There's some people out there that think you got to sound like 1988 Mike Tramp. It's got to be Vito in the band, or they're not going to listen. Are there people out there that are giving you that? I mean, because there's a lot of people that do. I hate to say it.
Yeah, well, well, there are a few, but it's really only because they're getting lost. They're really on a way to see Motley Crue because they're the true representation of how they were in 1984.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, but I'm
I
thankful that
can't
you're still
please
doing.
everyone, I can't please everyone, and sometimes I can't even please myself. This is for those who want to hear that. And probably the best praise is not that it's great to hear the old songs or you did a pretty good job, your voice sounds great and stuff like that, but it's more the people saying this sounds like a brand new album.
Yeah.
I know the songs, but even when I hear it, it sounds like an up-to-date rock album.
Right. Right.
So the songs in itself have gotten a new life, and I feel great that I can, I can't, and this is not dissing myself, and also of course not dissing those who fell in love with the band in '87 and so on and love the original album, stuff like that. I can't I can't stand listening to myself singing that high back then. It's not a sound, at least for me. And of course, it wasn't also meant to. go in and being able to sort of, stand its test of time in 2024. But the songwriting is as current as it can be, and that is the true sort of like reward Vito and I get from have been able to write songs that we sort of feel timeless. They're not outdated 80s songs that completely stink and smell of that they were a part of a decade, a very loud and visual decade, but actually there are classic rock and roll songs that we just happen to be a band that were part of the 80s that wrote those songs. But in the long run, Vito and I were always on the way to bring this band over on the sides where bands like Styx and Journey, Kansas, early Deep Purple, and here, of course, I'm talking about the keyboard being a main instrument, both in the songwriting and the performance. Not a background kind of keyboard, but a main keyboard. And Vito and I wanted to take those songs over to that part, but never really got a chance to bring over there. And part of it was, of course, we sort of just like many other bands were caught up in that image that MTV was sort of controlling.
Sure.
That everything was so loud visual because of there were videos. We would definitely have pulled back, and there might be other bands that might not have spiked their hair that high if it wasn't because a camera was on the other side.
Right.
But it just
Right.
so we all just became a product of circumstances or of a time that we were part of. And then when the 80s ended, and people can say, oh, and when grunge came around, but when the 80s basically were too much, we had, and I'm adding myself, but it had been cloned, it had been watered out. There were too much, and the song quality of the songs was just dying out. Everybody was writing an 18 in Life. Everybody was writing and When the Children Cry. Everybody
Right.
was just doing what the other band had done before. And then suddenly, the interesting part of it was time limited. And so then, the second a new sound came in, it was very easy for the industry to just say, okay, there's a new kid in town, and his name
Right.
is Eddie Vedder.
Right. That's a good explanation because a lot of people get caught up in the whole Nirvana and that it was alternative music that wiped out. But like you're just saying, it was because the repetitiveness of the music and like you said, everybody had the big hair. I'm looking. I want to show you something real quick. Get this. I was looking at this old hit parader right here. It's got Trickster on the front, and it's got these guys right here. I don't know if you can see that. It's
Yeah, 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 of course.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, in that interview in Hit Parader, y'all were gearing up for this new album, and it was right at the time of the alternative music coming in. It wasn't right quite yet. It was April of '91. It was a hard time for me. I just lost both of my grandfathers had just died at the same time, and I was reaching out for music. I needed music to help me heal, and I picked up this album called Main Attraction. And to me, it was one of the best albums ever, and probably my favorite album from y'all. But what's sad is, you talk about the record companies, and what I want to know this because I know people talk about Nirvana. They came in, they wiped it out. They talk about different things, but from where I read in that article in Hit Parader, y'all were gearing up for this album, but y'all had trouble with the record labels pushing you to do certain things. They wanted this, you know, and you were influenced by those guys, but y'all did an album that you really wanted to do. Was it, and then they kind of quit, you know, uh, putting y'all out there and promoting y'all. Was that payback for you
doing what you want to do? Was that what they did? I mean, that's what I
Well,
was
yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
right?
Um, I mean, there are a lot. I mean, first of all, us being there at that time, we only knew so much. And it's interesting for you to bring it up because it's not every day that I think about it. Now, if you go back, I mean, if you're asking me the question, if you go back and place yourself there, you remember of how the mood was, what you were thinking and stuff like that. Because basically, in reality, before the album was released, first of all, and I've sort of, um, pointed it out in different interviews that, but it because of course the story when White Lion disbanded, when I ended White Lion for the next 25 years, there's not one story anywhere about White Lion. They were never given a reason why the band suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. It's almost like nobody gave a fuck. And that's always something to raise a question about when I made that decision. But at the same time, we were under the impression, and Vito and I had spent almost a year writing these songs because the previous album, Big Game, had been rushed, and we were not about to repeat that mistake. And I hate to sit here and use the word mistake and stuff like that because Vito and I already took it very serious when we wrote the songs. But the whole procedure about going into the studio after being 2 years on the road with the Pride album and having 10 days to write the Big Game album, a follow up to a multi-million-dollar album, going into the studio, completely opposite that when we went in to record the Pride album. Not just did we know the songs that well, we had recorded the whole album one time before, a year before in Germany, and Candid. The songs were our live show. We knew these songs inside out. When we went into the studio to record a Big Game, we'd never even been in a rehearsal studio recording these songs or rehearsing these songs, trying them out, different, tempo, anything and all those kind of stuff. So it was always something that bothered us, but we didn't know it at the time. But we could see it as we went along that maybe coming from a multi-platinum album and then the next one not doing as well, you start feeling that. So when Vito and I sat down to start writing Main Attraction, we were only looking at the quality of the songs and we were not listening to anything. Nobody had any form of influence. Nobody in the record company heard the songs. Nobody in the record company heard any of the songs from the other albums before the song. They were never part of the band. Atlantic Records were never part of White Lion recording. They came by once during the studio recordings, and that was it. So it wasn't like, hence the sort of a great documentary about the making of Pump with Aerosmith, sort of one of these documentaries about a band not struggling, but different things going on in the studio, where you see the famous A&R guy John Kalotner coming in and out of studio and voicing his opinion. That didn't exist, for example, and I knew John very well, and he liked White Lion, stuff like that. But we didn't have a guy like that from Atlantic Records that would come in there and voice their opinion and maybe put a doubt in the band's mind if we were going the right way. And here I'm specifically talking about the Big Game album, which is a follow-up and which is something that the record company has pushed the band to rush. That's a key factor in the band's career. If there ever was a time when somebody needed to voice their opinion, it would have been then. And they showed up once, and 25 to 30 years later, there is a story going on that the two guys from the record company, which was the Big Cheese, going out in the rental car and looking at each other, and one of the guys saying, "Why are we letting them do this? Where are their fucking balls? Where are their responsibility?" We had some great songs on that album, but we sort of just needed to just have somebody just take a little bit more charge, because we're obviously in there the total opposite that when we were recording the Pride album. We were in there with a lot of money on our bank accounts, and it had its effect on our focus and our concentration. Not when I was singing the songs, not when we were recording the basic tracks, or when we were doing the guitar parts, but overall the focus of the hunger we had when we were recording the Pride album and living in one apartment together and getting $100 a week for just a pizza or a Coca-Cola or a six-pack of beer or something like that.
Right. Um, and the first album, talking about the Pride album, and it took a long time for that album to kind of get off the
That's
ground.
another point, yeah.
Ironically, the song "Wait," you know, how fitting that you had to wait like a year. I remember that. I was thinking, where these guys come from? It's like suddenly y'all have a hit. Wait, and then it was like, tell me, and when the children cry, and I was like, whoa, they're suddenly here they are, and you're on MTV. Where was MTV on the next album? Where was MTV on? I know Love Don't Come Easy. I remember that video coming out. I was like, yeah, but it was like nothing after that. It was like, hey, they're back, and then it was like nothing. Why? Why did they decide to be so big on the first album and bring in all that publicity, and then suddenly nothing?
Well, you sort of can ask yourself why the movie studios decided to have Tom Cruise be the vampire Lestat in Interview with the Vampire, when for 5 books of the vampire Lestat, in the Anne Rice books, was sort of like a 6'5" Dave Lee Roth character, and then they decide to put Tom Cruise in. Some people in offices make weird decisions sometimes, and the same thing with you sometimes think that people in record companies know about music. Most of the people sit there are just really, looking at sales figures and what it's going to take. There are people in the history of rock and roll that were the guys that broke bands, and they're the legends that really were out there with the bands and found the magic in the bands. And that's why those bands, from Zeppelin to Van Halen or to AC/DC. Now, of course, we're only talking about just some bands around, you could mention it, but they were the people that were physically, involved in finding the core of what it takes to break a band and so on. So, but then when MTV came out, breaking the bands on the live circuit was not as important anymore, because with one video, you basically reached the entire country. That, of course, that didn't mean that we didn't go on tour after, but basically, suddenly the entire United States and most of the Western world were to follow would see those bands and respond in buying the album, so and so, and then the bands would get big, and then they would go on tour. But when Zeppelin and AC/DC or the Police went on tour, I mean that was like a Volkswagen bus and squeezed together, or the old ways, of a band going out, and so I would just think that because that's how they broke into the music business and how they captured the fans, it would stay with them forever. It would not be in Lego, but breaking via a video and a visual had a different impact. Of course, in the long run, the songs stand the test of time, and I'm proud to know that bringing these White Lion songs and these Vita Brada and My Tramp composition back. I'm proud of these songs. They're not cheesy. They stand the test of time. They don't have an age or specific time period where you would place them. I mean, I
Right.
wouldn't place them in the 50s, but
Well, that's a good point too, because things happen, and the band broke up in '91, And, I think a lot of the fans and some of the fans afterward, maybe that rediscovered the band, they didn't get a chance to really get, you know, up close to the album main attraction. And like the song Lights and Thunder. I remember when I heard that song, I was like, yeah, this song's pretty cool. But you're able to reach the fans again, and new fans hear that song redone. And like you said, it sounds like it was made for today. And the video was really cool. That's got to help out the fact that the fans and the new fans get a chance to rediscover and hear this version of the song in a different way. And that's really good. That's a chance for you to redo a song that fans can hear again, right? I like that song. I like the new version of Lights and Thunder.
Of course we're staying, I mean, 95% close to the original version, or else there wouldn't be any point of recording these songs again.
Right.
Um, and it's one of the, I mean, there's so many thoughts that comes back to me, both when I talk to you or do other interviews, or when I have to sort of like explain about recording the not the physical going into the studio and pressing the red button and and then but just of how much life there is behind this whole thing called White Lion, and Mike Tramp coming to New York in 1982, forming the band together with Vito, going through the process of finding members and members leaving, and then settling on the rhythm section that would be the White Lion band on James Lomenzo and Greg D'Angelo on the 4 albums. The ins and out, the chase was better than the catch for this band. We were very, very strong as a brotherhood in the early years when we were underdogs, and bit by bit, it starts falling apart in its natural way when we started hitting the arenas and the big bus and the separate dressing rooms and different ways of looking at the day. I mean, it's just a classic, but also the people that we were paying percentages to protect the band and handle the band was not shepherding the band the way the band should have been shepherded, because not to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up in the movie or the documentary, Some Kind of Monsters by Metallica. The first time I was watching, I was sitting there with a smirk on my face, and the second time I was watching, I was seeing what was going on.
Right.
And I was seeing the story of many bands. The only difference is at that time when you're watching this movie and you're seeing the debate and the difficulties between Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield, you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar entity that has so much people on the outside willing to come in and protect this, like I said, multi-million-dollar business. So there are ways of dealing with that. So I'm bringing in a therapist, or a gym teacher, or whatever fuck you might bring in. You don't have that when the same effect when you're still a band that sort of is only still breaking into what could maybe have led to a national headliner act. But we needed it back then. And Vito and I, in the conversations we have had since, we haven't had that many conversations. But when we talk, that's what we talk about. We talk about, the disappointment in those that were supposed to keep us safe from the wolves. The ones that were supposed to guide us, or at least put doubts in our heads when we made strong decisions, if we should have made those decisions. And to finish on this, that would eventually lead to me saying to Vito, 2 days before the final show on a tour with a new rhythm section that we were doing in America, just to break them in. And we were coming to this final show in Boston on September 2nd. A couple of days before, I don't know what it was that hit me, but I said to Vito, when we play Boston, it's going to be the final show. And Vito would just look at me and he just said, okay. And then we would play the final show, and I said it on stage, I said it on the radio, just to be as dramatic as possible. And I went to Los Angeles, and he went to New York, and we didn't speak about this for another 15 years. That's one thing.
Wow.
But the following weeks, Vito didn't call me to say, are you sure about this? Management didn't call me to say, are you sure about this? Record company didn't call me. Are you sure about this? The merchandiser or the merchandising company that had given the band $1 million in advance didn't call to say, hey, how are we going to get our money back? The music publishers didn't call us to say, hey, are you sure about this? So there were not 1 inch and 1 ounce of fight in any of those that would draw in massive commission off the band. The band was still a strong band. The band could still have carried on even after Cobain and Vedder and Chris Cornell and what would follow after that. We could still have found our place because we weren't depending on the image and so and so. But nobody, not one fucking person fought to go back. And I can tell you honestly, of course, if Vito had called me the next week and we had started talking about things we always talked about, and even though we were night and day, we were heaven and hell, we were one when it came to the music. We always were one when it came to the music. It's just we had 2 completely different ways of looking at life. And maybe in reality, that's also what made it possible for us to sit down and write great rock and roll songs.
Wow. So if one person,
those are long wow, man, those are stories.
That was good. I mean, so if one person would have said, man, what are y'all doing? Y'all get back out there. Keep going. If one person, would it have been different?
I mean, of course, our manager, our old manager, George, which, I lived with his family for 3 years before White Line got success. I grew up in that Italian family. I saw his kids being born. I'm almost godfather to his kids. I mean, he's like a Tony Soprano type. He always used to smack us around and say, hey, come on, guys. And I'm just wondering, where were you right there when we needed some sense getting knocked into us? If that had been the point of saving the entity.
Wow.
Or saving the band, or whatever,
So what do you think was the reason why everybody went silent and went cold and went the other way? Why did everybody turn their head? Why didn't they go? Why didn't they see the value and the dream and the hopes and why did they not see that vision and turn their head? What was the reason?
When you remove an engine from a car, somebody's going to have to push the car just to get down the street. And, I really don't know. Vito and I wrote these songs, but I can tell you one thing for sure. And that goes, and I don't even need to be a question on this. I was the engine of everything. Once Vito and I had written those songs, I was also the engine that drove to Vito's house to write these songs. So I was a catalyst. I was the energy. I was the Energizer Bunny. I was the one that drove this band pulled this band to wherever this band needed to go. Once I didn't pull anymore, I don't know. I don't know.
So you're saying if people don't care, you don't care, and you're out, right? You're out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those kind of things. I mean, I remember it's one of those stupid things. I remember being on tour with Ace Frehley. just as Pride album had been released, and we were starting getting, I mean, the MTV video, nobody even seen, but we were starting getting there. And we were just driving in our own cars, to each show and stuff like that, and we got to one of the shows somewhere in Pennsylvania. And we just ran into the dressing room. Our road crew had gotten there before and put the gear up, and so we're ready. I didn't have time enough to get the hairspray out and tease my hair up. And Vito looked at me and says, "Man, what? You have a death wish on the band?" And it was sort of just a point of saying, okay, if the hair is not up there, there's no way you can go out and do the show. It's a stupid analogy but it was just a clear situation of putting the emphasis and the importance on the wrong things.
Yeah. That whole image, the image that everybody had.
Exactly, like saying, well, oh no, you got to do this and got to do this, or why you want to do this, and just say, maybe also have faith in the person that sat down in 1985 when Ronald Reagan was the president, and it was pretty clear about who was a big boss in the world. And here I'm writing "When the Children Cry," a song that should be played every single day when you talk about Israel, Palestine, crisis there, or Ukraine, or all the other fuck ups in the world that man has done. But here I am, and sitting in a concrete basement in my manager's house in Staten Island, writing that song.
Wow. And that song, like you said, still relevant today. You're talking about the
song
words.
I don't think there's any song that is as current as that. You surely can't play Louis Armstrong, "It's a Wonderful World."
Right.
Because it isn't. As
But
much as I love that song.
Yeah. Songs like that, though, are like prophetic and are still hitting people, especially after all these years. But thankfully, that engine, the little engine that could, the guy behind all that still had that within him to keep going and have a restoration. Talking about a car that gets restored, you see an old car, an old 57 Chevy, that used to be pretty. That used to run down the streets, man. I see that thing driving, and you paint it, you put the new motor in, still got the same parts, and you go, we can do this, right? I guess that's the feeling you had, right?
I love those kind of shows, man. I used to,
right?
in the early years in New York, I used to, what was it called? Like This Little Old House with Bob Barker? No, not Bob Wheeler.
Bob Vila, yeah.
Bob Vila, the restoration of the house. Dude, I used to just sit and just watch this for hours, man. I mean, it's sort of what I like to do in I've restored my own farm and things like that and rebuild. I love the concept of it, the metaphor in it, what it means. American pickers finding stuff that can be restored, restored and bring back to life, because the purity of the foundation is what it is, because there's only one foundation. Everything is built upon that, And the same thing goes with rock and roll, from Bill Haley to Chuck Berry to Elvis Presley to Zeppelin to Sabbath to Stones and the Beatles. I know where I come from.
Right.
I walk on the road they paved, or else it would just be a gravel road that would have so much dust I couldn't sing. But thank God to them. Thank God to Freddie Mercury, Phil Lynott, AC/DC, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, all the stuff that motivated me and made me love rock and roll.
And thank God for Mike Tramp, because there's a lot of people that were influenced by you, and
yeah, I try. That's why I also try, in many ways, in revealing and being as honest as possible. I know I played a part in it in the 80s because it was the name of the game. I came to America, watching and following David Lee Roth and what he stood for, and listening to his interviews. And early on also knew that I couldn't do what he was doing because it went so against what I stood for. I couldn't, it just wasn't what I wanted to say. Something serious. During the 80s, not a lot of people wanted you to say something serious. So in many ways, it failed in the long run, I'm proud of sort of who I am and what I stood for, because that would outlive that sort of silliness of that way of just entertaining instead of answering how the hell you wrote that song, and instead you would just dodge the question and say something nonsense and things like that. So when I look down the road, and when I meet younger bands out there that are sort of influenced what I did, and possibly, of course, also other bands, I'm not going to tell them what kind of shampoo or hairspray to use. I'm going to try to get them focused a little bit more about what you are starting now is about 100 times harder than it was when I did it. And when I did it, it was already hard. So what is there left for you to do? And so on. So, and that's nice to be able to pass on something like that. Those are the same kind of things that I say to my kids about going into the world, knowing dad's music, knowing that, two of my three kids are musical talented. They play instruments, they write songs without them having been asked to write a song. But I'm not gonna tell them to go into the music business. There's something left. But the important part music play in their life and happiness, that I'm going to preach like religion to them, because that is possibly the most faithful companion they can take with them through life in whatever path they choose. Rock and roll or great songs, could be country, western, love that, or blue, whatever, is not going to let them down. It will always be there whenever you press play.
Right. And you were talking earlier about the songs, how the songs touch people all the way back then. They're still touching people, like with this new album, coming out, and you're singing it to all these fans. Here's something I noticed though. Now I was looking on YouTube and I was reminiscing all the songs, the hits like "Wait" and and "When the Children Cry," and they've got millions of views, right? You know what I noticed? There's the two of your most viewed songs on YouTube were "You're All I Need" and "Till Death Do Us Part," right? From Main
And
Attraction.
you know why? You know why that is?
Go ahead.
Well, that is because those songs are two of the biggest songs in Indonesia, a country of 400 million people.
Right.
And my kids mom is Indonesian, and I've spent 16 years there back and forth, and I can't walk one step on the street before somebody pulls out a phone behind me and play one of those songs.
And those are good songs.
Now here's another interesting thing about that, because at the time when we sort of pulled the plug on White Lion, we were starting making noise with the Main Attraction album in Asia. And I'm not talking about Japan. I'm talking about South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, Singapore, etc., etc. There could have been a time when the band could have focused on some of those countries, while grunge found its place in America, and sort of MTV 80s sort of disappear, and then the songs would eventually have sort of appeared again without the video, and people would have realized how strong rock and roll songs are. They're even stronger when you don't see a face.
Yeah, right.
In the video, or girl in a bikini.
This is true. And those are just songs on YouTube without videos, but those could have been hits back then. I think if somebody had not given up, if everybody had not jumped ship. Now tell me this though. I know maybe you played the what if game, and maybe some people don't like to do that. But let's just say that you said, I don't want to, do this anymore. Nobody cares anymore. I'm bailing. And then Vito calls up about a month later and goes, you know, I still have faith in this band. What if he would have said, let's do this, and y'all kept going? Do y'all think y'all would have moved up the ladder and been an Aerosmith today? And everybody would have said, this band has survived all through the years. Do you think that would have changed anything if he would have just said, I think I want to keep going?
You're talking about the week after we departed from the band and stuff like that.
Right.
We would definitely have done several albums after and followed through and been very true to our rock and roll. And I hate to use the word serious, because we were also serious when we were doing the video for him, for Wait or Tell Me, and jumping around in very, very, like 80s colorful clothes. That was a part of that time. We also took that very serious. We knew that that's the band we needed to be at that time. But after Main Attraction and the depth of songwriting that Vito and I had gone into with that album, we would obviously had continued, and like I said to you earlier, brought in that main keyboard player, and already on that Main Attraction tour in Europe, I even started changing as a front man from the one that was sort of, doing, like the Olympic Games on stage, to just sort of, maybe gluing myself a little bit more to the middle with the mic stand and let the songs do the talking, instead of, the jumps from the Jump Riser and things like that. So we were already on the way there. So yes, to your answer, Vito and I, of course, would have gone there, and we would have found the way, and we weren't discouraged that Big Game had not done what Pride did, and we were not discouraged that it was an uphill battle with releasing Main Attraction, and the sort of basically the disappearance of the record company. I mean, first of all, the record company is the ones. I mean, it's not everybody that knows that Broken Heart was the first song that Vito and I wrote back in 1983, and it's also the opening song on our first album, Fight to Survive, 1984. The record company, or our A&R guy, Jason Flom, wanted us to re-record that song for Main Attraction. And Vito and I fought as hard as we could against that, because we did not need Broken Heart to make that album great. We could write songs equally as good. So we were always a little bitter about that we had to, already on our fourth album, re-record one of our own songs. When we finally released that as a second single, the entire record company was on a holiday break, which was basically just a kick in the balls. And only a week later, White Lion would come into New York to do a sold-out show at the Ritz, and nobody from the record company was there. And basically, this is probably when I make the decision inside my head, because there would only really be about 10 days to the final show from that show. So to me, that was basically, if I had any doubt before, I had no doubt now. So it was just really a matter of me saying, okay, we're just let's just finish this tour, and then I'm moving on.
Well, do you regret that decision? Would you look back and go, despite all that, the writing was on the wall, how they were treating you, you knew what was going on, but do you ever look back and go, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do? Or do you think that was the right thing to do?
No, I think that was the right thing to do, but that doesn't mean, let's put it this way, it basically just, it would only have prolonged the inevitable.
They didn't care either way.
And that can be for many different reasons, and certain things I don't, there's very few things I don't want to, say or stuff like that. But there's also a couple of small private things that just doesn't belong, and respect for others. But with White Lion finishing and me starting Freak of Nature, and with those two albums, the band recorded and wrote as a five person unit, is the highlight of my musical career. I'm not saying that the songs were better than Wait or When the Children Cry or Lights and Thunder. I'm only saying that with Freak of Nature, I experienced the ultimate of what it means to be a band. It's probably also why it only lasted for so long, but that feeling of what it's like to go to be in a rehearsal room with a band that writes the songs together. Nobody steps on each other's feet. We go into the studio, record the album live, and we would continue the procedure on the second album. That was a phenomenal experience, which at the same time also became one of the darkest times for me when I also broke up that band because I saw it fraying at the edges so quickly. And I had reached such a high level of what it felt to be in that. And then somehow I had seen how it also would be when it fell apart that quickly for many, many reasons that I still couldn't even explain today. So I knew at that time I had been in 3 bands, and that's equivalent to being married 3 times. And even though I sometimes joke around on that from stage saying, well, the first one took the kids, the second one took the house, and the third one took your album collection. What more do you have left? Are you going to think about starting a 4th band? No way. So obviously, from the second I did that, I took up the acoustic guitar and I started writing the first song, which would be my now 30-year solo career.
Right.
With 14 solo albums, that is just basically Mike Tramp when he's by himself.
Right. It's a lot safer that way to be solo in marriage and bands, right?
Well, nobody can break your heart if that person isn't there.
But it makes for good writing, when you go through some trials.
Well, I mean, I've never been really good about writing happy songs.
Right.
So even though I'm having a good time, I'm happy, I'm not going to go in and write that. I find that the darkness in my life and the melancholy and is the road I travel when I write. I'm not the bringer of good news, but with that being said, there are many people that find solace and peace and freedom and happiness and strength in my songs. So,
sure. Well, the people that relate to your music, like you said, even though the songs might be kind of somber and sad, if they relate to it and they go, hey, he's going through the same things I'm going through, there's a happiness, joy in that, right?
Yeah, and everybody's always entitled to, especially with a song like Little Fighter, which I had my own reason of writing, but so many people through that very long time since that song was written have made them that their own fighting song. And some of the stories that people tell me after the show of how much that song have meant to them sometimes breaks my heart. I mean, it's the saddest of the saddest stories that can be told about that, but still that song got them through that or got that person through that.
Sure. And like I told you earlier about, the main attraction, that album, both my granddads died in March of 91, and then the album came out in April. And it was one of those, you just kind of, it was kind of a somber kind of, I don't know, it was just kind of almost like a mystery to me. I don't know, but the music was like a friend that I needed at that time. And
yeah, of course. I mean,
right.
music is your best friend. Music will not like I said earlier on, it'll stand by your side. It won't let you down. Rock and roll is a companion for life.
Exactly. And with this new version of I mean, it's not going to replace White Lion, of course. This is you doing the songs of White Lion. Uh, has has Vito spoken out about his feelings about the music that you've done recently? Or can I ask that?
Really, not really. Like we were talking about it early on when you were speaking about Marcus and things like that. I can't speak for him. Um, Vito has made the decisions Vito has made, and he has to stand by them. And I can't be responsible for, obviously I'm not doing anything to spite Vito. I'm not doing anything malicious. I'm doing this because those songs have been a monkey on my back since 91. I haven't gone anywhere in the world where White Lion was not part of the interview or mentioned on the concert poster, regardless if it was Freak of Nature or my Tramp solo. It's just the way it is. So, I would have supported him if he had gone out and done that, and I'd been involved with Freak of Nature or my solo career and things like that. I mean, I hate to say this or I hate to show, I'm not gonna, the situation, but if my solo career had sort of taken off, a little more than it did, there would have been no chance that I would have done those albums here.
Yeah.
But one thing led to another, but I'm happy that because it's been a joy going out and singing these songs. There were many times singing these songs back in the White Line days that I dreaded it. I hated it. It was a struggle to sing these songs that high, and et cetera, et cetera. And another thing that might be a little hard to maybe understand for someone sitting at the sideline and seeing the success and seeing the band on the big stage and the covers in on the magazines and so on, so was that you have no idea of how much I was, if evolving every single day as White Line took off. And it was very, very dangerous because I was way ahead of my time, both lyrical wise and where I wanted to go. But where the band was and where the fans saw the band, they were not ready for you to go out there and cut your hair off and come back with a full grown beard, turning trucker, or so. But there were so many times I was just sitting there screaming at the mirror with that, how much that hair controlled you, and how you had become almost an image before an artist. And I've seen that. I've also seen that especially in heartthrob actors when they get known for like that kind of like cute role. I mean, they're dying to get into Fight Club in their next movie, to get pummeled and beat up and look, or whatever it is. It's just a natural thing that happens, and I think I can back it up. If you go back in your interview, that's how Vito and I felt as songwriters.
Right.
We were not going to repeat the songs we had written on the previous albums, but there would have been definitely people at the record company wanting, man, I hope they're going to write another Wait. I hope there's another When the Children Cried on those albums.
That's exactly right. You and going back to, summarizing the downfall of the hair metal band that they say, that's it. Everybody wanted that circle of the hair and the same kind of riffs. It was like a cookie cutter kind of a thing. That had to be, though, that has to be disheartening, though, when you want people to take you seriously and they see an image and they see they want a certain sound. That probably had a lot to do with, record companies and labels going, they want to put you in this box. They want you to be, and they want to put you on MTV, and they want you to be the next Bon Jovi, right? They want you to be the next whoever. And if you're not that guy, they don't have time for you, right? They don't care about your originality and what's on your heart and your awesome songwriting skills. You got to be this guy with the big hair, which, by the way, cool hair, though. You did have some
Yeah,
cool
yeah, no,
hair.
I had great hair. I still got great hair. It's just not as long. It's not as fun. I mean, I just like to, just,
It looks
when I'm
good.
performing, I just, I mean, it'll, it'll, it'll serve its purpose when I walk out on stage and stuff like that, et cetera, et
Sure.
cetera. But there's another thing too, because you hit it right on the nail. And I also just want to make sure that I don't end up saying, something that sort of contradicts. We enjoyed that time in the 80s.
Sure.
We enjoyed the hair. We enjoyed the video. We enjoyed the intention and stuff like that. And nobody should go back and feel, that we were badly done by. But we did end up in a place like we were, suddenly a product. And you can only imagine of how many Taylor Swift copies that, of course, will never happen. How many Beyonce copies that, I mean, anytime there's a success, somebody will try to create something like that.
Right.
I mean, how long did it? I mean, once the big three grunge act or four, if you want to bring Alice in Chains in on it, how quick did it go before there were clones of them? And suddenly everybody was singing like Eddie Vedder.
Sure.
And you sound like that. Suddenly every band was sounding the same.
Right.
There was no difference between the procedure or the development of the 90s as the 80s came out of the 70s. They were just now they were, now it was the 90s became, the 80s when they hadn't been to the hairdresser and getting their roots, bleached blonde, or they haven't shaved, or they were just hanging out in the clothes they were wearing, whether working on the car in the garage. I mean, a lot of the bands that succeeded in the 90s, you can go back and find pictures of Pantera. They look just like Poison. But they just wouldn't have made it as Poison because they weren't as good looking as Poison. And, you find pictures of Pearl Jam, in 80s clothes. They weren't just born 1990.
Right.
They played music for 10 years. So, of course, they probably had Motley Crue and White Lion and Cinderella and Rat in their album collection. Of course they did. Just like we had proudly Journey and Van Halen and Eddie Money and Foreigner and Cheap Trick and Kansas and Pat Benatar. They're part of my golden 70s album collection that I worship.
Right.
Let's not kid ourselves. We're just part of evolution.
Right.
And sort of like when you look at that famous picture of the ape and the caveman, and for every step they take, they straighten up. I mean, do that from 50s. Bill Haley and, like I said, Chuck Berry, Elvis, and then you go on.
Right. That's right. That I'm wondering about, who decides these little trends? I mean, is there somebody in a room somewhere that goes, okay, flip the switch to alternative? I mean, I wonder how did this trend start? And I know it had to be a mental thing. It had to be the fact that everybody was doing the same thing. Let's try something new. But I wonder how did they collectively decide we're going to do this grunge thing? Because somewhere it had to be on the minds of record labels during in 1991. Because, and I think Alice in Chains was the only band that I'd heard of that I didn't even know that they were alternative. I remember they had this Man in the Box song that was in the summer of 91. I remember that. There was no Nirvana. I mean, Nirvana was around, but they hadn't released that second album that the Nevermind and all that stuff. So there had to be some kind of collective idea of people going, we've got to start pushing a different sound. We've got to start doing something different. We've got to reject the White Lions and the whoever's. We've got to ignore them because we got to push this new music in. Do you ever think about that? There had to be some kind of revolution of people going, we got to bring in this music, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been Apple, Steve Jobs.
It might have been. You know, it had to be.
Let me just turn the lights on for a second. I think it's getting
Go
a little
ahead.
dark.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you know, once they let go of doing any more Jurassic Park movies, I mean, maybe, maybe Spielberg and Tom Hanks, since they have such a good team of wanting to bring back, the dead. I don't ever, I mean, I have a lot of the music documentaries, both the fun ones and the little bit more serious. I don't think anyone has ever really, let's say, for example, you went back to maybe 1986 and looked at what bands in Seattle would have been around at that time. And so, because, like I said, those bands didn't learn to play their instruments just in a week.
Right.
They're close to, our age to within, give and take. I mean, they're not teenagers. It's not, it's not the, so yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's not so interesting musically, but it's just interesting how it happens.
Right.
But we also know that, first there were the turntable, then there were the cassette tape, then the 8-track, then came the CD, and
Right.
and in between there was the laser disc and the VH tape,
Yes.
VHS tapes, and the Betamax and things like that. And you and I remember when I had the big Motorola phone in my car. And it was just something, once in a while you would call someone, once in a while. It never rang.
No, nobody ever calls.
And then suddenly, oh my boy. Oh my God, man. It's something just changed with that phone and the internet coming in. Holy cow.
It's those trends, and everybody's got to do it. Everybody's got to, I guess.
Yeah, but there of course definitely is an explanation. And so I don't think that the elephant, the lion, or the Cape buffalo over the past many hundred years have evolved. They're
Right.
basically looking exactly the same.
Right.
But man isn't.
Right.
Man is still on the way of changing. I mean, it's how we have changed, how we live longer, we are definitely we're a creature that's up to no good.
Right. I totally agree with it. Well, tell me this, and I could talk to you forever, but I won't keep it too long. But now you've got this new album out, which is what I've heard is awesome. Now, are there some songs you haven't done? Is there gonna be a volume 3? Or tell me this, are you gonna do original music with this band? Is that a possibility?
Well, I mean, anything is possible when it comes to going into a studio record. The problem is, and almost, the viewers, the listeners, or most people out there are probably aware of, there's no such thing really as a record contract anymore,
Yeah.
like in the old days. And of course, we didn't really know it in the beginning, but of course that big advance money we got from signing a record deal was obviously a loan, and that would be the first money collected when we sold records.
Right.
Today, most rock records are being recorded in your home,
Right.
one way or another. Um, not that we want to do that, but maybe that we really don't have a choice if we want to be able to produce a record, that there's no budget for a band to go into a recording studio, which are closing down on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
But that old magic when you used to go in there, and you might show up at not Keith Richard, but the rest of us would show up at about 11 or 12 in the afternoon, find our ways and start working on it. And then, we go get some dinner line, but we would be working till 3 a.m.
Right.
And I mean, great things would happen, and sometimes no things would happen, things like that. Now these days, if we when we go into, we usually go in and record the bass and the drums, but mainly the drums, because a lot of times if we want a room sound of a studio, your bedroom is not going, or kitchen's not going to work the same.
Right.
So we go in there. But man, when it's 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the drummer has to leave to go home and pick up his kid.
Right. Right.
So, and that's also just evolution of us being older, parents, responsible to many different things. There are a lot of people that playing in the band that has a side gig, a job, because the live shows do not bring enough money in. We're
Right.
not talking about Motley Crue or Rolling Stones or Guns N' Roses,
Right.
getting millions and millions of dollars a show. We're talking us going out there and touring on the road. So the question you asked me is, will there be a volume 3? Would there be a recording of original songs for with this kind of outfit? Why would we want to record original material? It would simply be for us because we could, and
Yeah.
we wanted to see if we could um, go through the process and follow it till the end. There's, of course, also the point of the chase being better than the catch. And the chase is writing the songs, recording the songs. The catch is releasing the album, and nobody knows it.
Right.
So you're almost down to doing this as sort of a fishing trip with your best friends, that you're doing it for the love of being together. You hope you're going to catch a fish, but it's more about doing the trip, getting away from home, all those kind of things. I'm definitely up for it. Just to try the process, and because I know what it's like to work with others when it comes to the writing process, when everybody is sort of focused on the same thing. And now that we're well adult, a lot of the ego and the importance on who starts a song and stuff like that is unimportant. All that matters is the end result of how good is the song or how good it feels. So obviously, when you go in and write those kind of songs, yeah, of course, you're going to write songs that are 6, 7 minutes long. You're going to go back to what the bands in the 60s did when they
Yeah.
really didn't give a fuck about anything but write music and live music. It was before radio really was playing those kind of bands. We're not talking about Stones and the Beatles or the
Right.
Bee Gees or that, but we're talking about, Jethro Tull or Black Sabbath or Emerson, Lake and Palmer. We're talking about the bands that just went in there, man, and just the Who went crazy, and just did all the things we all dreamed about we could do later on.
It's funny, I was thinking about how you go into a band like back in the 80s and all the seriousness of it and the big productions and all that, only to come back to where you are now and realize the importance of just enjoying, the simplicity of, like you said, like fishing, just enjoying being with somebody and recording, being
That's
with
why. That's
somebody,
why. Yeah. That's
you
why
know.
you never throw a pair of old jeans out. You never throw your old leather jacket or your boots out, because sooner or later you return them into them, and you put them on. You go, man, I missed you. I feel so much at home here.
And so I don't do it. I don't throw stuff out because I'm thinking I might need those one day. I might like those shoes, that they're comfortable. I shouldn't have thrown them out. I don't like to throw out stuff that I can still use. But
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, it's also a point if it's been a companion, for you during that journey, is that you might throw out your, like your pastel colored dinner jacket that you wore because you were influenced by Miami Vice.
right,
But whatever, you might also just keep it because you remember that that's when you met your wife or something like that. Everything has a memory, and memories are important, especially as we are on a way into a world that is completely out of control.
sure. And I think that's why albums like you got out, coming out in August, is so important. There's a nostalgia part to it, but there's also a new, it's like this is the version, this is his mature side. This is him telling a story. This is a storyteller telling about his life. I always love to hear older people tell about how it was in the old days. But they didn't have to dress up like they did back in the day for me to understand them. They told the story from their perspective. There's a new appreciation of you singing songs. They bring back the nostalgia of a song like Lights and Thunder. And I remember those days, but I also see and hear your perspective now and appreciate the fact that you're still around and you're still doing it. And it's not too shabby. It sounds great.
Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
fits.
Yeah,
Right?
it's also not to show, but to tell yourself and give yourself a little bit of patting yourself on the back and says, man, you worked for this, and the way you took care of yourself allows you now to go in with a clear vision. You can sing the songs with conviction. You still sound like, or not, you sound like you're you're at your top of your game at where you are now.
Right.
um so it helps you also through the dark times about the other things in your life that affects you.
Right.
Rock
It,
and roll becomes the escape, not the escape, but like I said earlier on, it's the best friend. It's not going to let you down.
right.
It
I
doesn't
think
talk back.
it sure don't. Neither does a guitar. That's why you pick up a guitar and play because you're like, this is my friend. He won't talk back. Um, well, there's a lot of good times ahead with people that appreciate music. And my hope for you is that people go back and listen to the old stuff, but they also appreciate the music you have now and go, this is good stuff, man. And you're keeping it alive. You're keeping that music alive, but you're bringing a new perspective, but you're keeping that alive. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with not sounding identical because nobody sounds identical to, the way they used to. And we all get older and we change and we adapt. There's no way to even go back if you could. It would have been, you'd probably feel weird, like if you got in a time machine and like you were saying earlier about singing those songs, if you could go back in time and put yourself in that environment, you probably look around and go, it's kind of awkward. It don't feel this because you're so used to now. You're so used to how
Yeah.
things have changed, right? And you're
All the
okay with it,
experience,
right?
all the
It,
experience. It's called growing older gracefully and
yes,
being with it. So I thank you for for allowing me also. You know what? This is much cheaper than therapy. It's like I don't have to pay for this, man. And stuff like that.
a lot of people tell me that. A
So
lot of
a
people say
lot
that.
of stuff like that is good. in every interview I do, there's something that I discover and things like that. So, man, we'll meet out there, or we'll touch base another time. I appreciate it, Gary. Thanks a lot for your dedication to this, and challenge me with some interesting views and stuff like that. It to me, it's what it's all about.
Well, thank you, Mike. And I appreciate talking to you.
You got it, brother.
And we'll see you out there. I'll definitely see you out there somewhere. Keep
Yeah,
it.
whereabouts are you? Whereabouts are
I'm in Alabama, South Alabama. Oh yeah,
Oh,
by the way,
man.
is I'm hoping you got some extra spots for some shows. Y'all need to come down to like Mobile or Pensacola.
Yeah, man. Man, Huntsville, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama, what used to be like some big towns for white line in the back. Unfortunately, it won't happen there because, one thing is that we had a couple of openings here and there, but if we're up in Detroit, next day, it's not going to work in Alabama.
Oh, I saw where you're going to be in Florida. You're making a trip. I know you're in Missouri. You might be in Georgia, but you're sweeping through Florida. And I was thinking if somehow you could
Yeah,
go to
and
like,
after those two shows after Florida, we're heading up to New Jersey, and we actually got one private show on the 24th in Maryland to make it up there. We can't swing or stuff like that,
yeah, okay, I got you.
I wish we could, man. I
You
I
can
love
do it.
Alabama.
You could do it another time, but
You got it, bro.
but
Rock and roll.
that'll work. All right, man. Take care. We'll see you later.
See you, Gary. Bye.
All right, man. Bye, Mike.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mike Tramp. What a guy. So many stories. Could have talked to him forever. But we had to, go on with our lives. But I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, some different topics of discussion. Some things maybe you haven't heard before. But check out their new album. They got the Songs of White Lion Volume 2 coming out August 23rd. And check out the website for more information. See where he's playing near you. And until next time, everybody, always remember to keep the music real.